From legends reclaiming their glory at Augusta, to rookie nightmares that were just one bad swing away from a miracle, these are the most dramatic endings in golf history. 6 playoff holes, 6 chances to end it, and the guy with every physical advantage on the golf course couldn't close the deal. The scene was the 2021 BMW Championship at Caves Valley. Bryson DeChambeau and Patrick Cantlay had completely lapped the field, finishing regulation at a record-shattering 27 under par. This was supposed to be Bryson's coronation. He was outdriving Cantlay by 40 yards on every hole and physically overpowering the course. He even tipped his cap to the crowd on the 18th in regulation, basically accepting the trophy before it was over. But Patty Ice had other plans. Cantlay forced the playoff with a cold-blooded 20-footer on the final hole. And once they went to sudden death, the tension turned into a grind. Bryson had a 6-footer to win it on the second hole and blinked. He lipped out on the third. He even survived a trip into the creek on the fourth. They traded blows until the 6th extra hole, where Cantlay finally slammed the door with one last 18-foot birdie. When Bryson's response stayed out, it was over. All that power, all that distance, all those chances, and the guy who just kept making putts walked away with the trophy. That brings us to one of the most agonizing collapses the game has ever seen, where a single moment of tension can erase 4 days of perfection. Mito Pereira was never supposed to be the story at Southern Hills. He was a PGA Championship debutant and a 175-to-1 long shot who somehow found himself on the 72nd tee with a 1-shot lead. A simple par would have won him a major. Even a bogey would have kept his hopes alive in a playoff. He'd entered Sunday with a 3-stroke cushion, but the final round had been rough. 3 bogeys in the front 9, nerves eating him alive. Still, he was standing on that tee box with the Wanamaker trophy waiting. Then came the swing. Off balance, rushed, ugly. The drive veered hard right and bounced into the creek running down the side of the fairway. From there, it was agony in slow motion. It took him 3 more shots to reach the green before he knocked it in for double bogey, finishing 1 shot outside the playoff. Instead, Justin Thomas stormed, back from 7 shots down to win, leaving Mito as the man who held the trophy in his hands only to watch it shatter on the very last swing. Coming in next. When the pressure's at its peak and everything's gone wrong, sometimes greatness shows up in the most ridiculous way possible. Jordan Spieth had led the tournament for 3 straight days, but by Sunday afternoon, the magic had faded. He struggled his way into a playoff against Daniel Berger, and it looked like his momentum had finally run dry. On the first playoff hole, things went from bad to worse. Spieth's drive clipped a tree and died in the fairway, leaving him over 200 yards out. His approach shot then drifted into a greenside bunker. At that point, he was facing a long, difficult sand shot just to stay alive. But then, Jordan did what Jordan does. He splashed the bunker shot perfectly, watching it skip along the green before tracking straight into the heart of the cup. Berger was left standing there in total shock. His own birdie attempt didn't even stand a chance after that. He later joked that there isn't much you can say when Jordan does Jordan things. Even Spieth admitted there was a massive amount of luck involved, from the lucky bounce off the tree to the hole out from the sand. But as they say, sometimes you have to be good to be lucky, and that shot officially put him in the record books alongside Tiger Woods. Next up, a story about how thin the line is between a breakthrough and a heartbreak. We're looking at Tommy Fleetwood, a guy with 159 starts and 42 top 10 finishes, but 0 wins on the PGA Tour. That stat line followed him like a shadow all the way to the final round at TPC River Highlands, and unfortunately, it was about to get a lot heavier. Tommy started Sunday with a comfortable 3-shot lead. Things got shaky early with 3 bogeys in his first 4 holes, but he managed to steady the ship. With just 3 holes left to play, he still held a 2-shot cushion. It felt like his moment was finally here, and all he had to do was cross the finish line without any major mistakes. But, it is not always smooth in the greens. Keegan Bradley started charging from 3 back, draining a massive 35-foot birdie on the 15th to apply the pressure. Tommy then wobbled with a bogey on the 16th, and suddenly that 3-shot lead had shrunk to just 1. It all fell apart on the 18th hole. Tommy's approach shot left him with a long 50-foot putt for birdie. His first attempt died 7 feet short of the cup, and his second putt agonizingly veered right. A 3-putt bogey at the worst possible time. Bradley stuck his approach to 6 feet and buried the birdie to win it outright. Tommy couldn't even bring himself to watch the ball drop. Coming in next, the greatest comeback in Ryder Cup history. That didn't quite happen. Europe entered with an 11.5 to 4.5 lead, the largest in European Ryder Cup history. Before a single ball was struck, Victor Hovland withdrew with a neck injury, and the match with Harris English was declared a tie, making it 12 to 5. Europe needed just 2.5 points from 11 matches. At that moment, the Americans woke up. The U.S. scored 5.5 of the first 6.5 points awarded on Sunday. Cameron Young and Justin Thomas won their matches on the 18th hole. Bryson DeChambeau erased a 5-hole deficit against Matt Fitzpatrick to earn a half point, tying the largest singles comeback in Ryder Cup history. Scottie Scheffler took down Rory McIlroy in a heavyweight battle, putting his first point on the board after going 0-4 earlier in the week. Xander Schauffele demolished Jon Rahm 4-3. Suddenly, the impossible was looking possible. For one electric stretch, every single match on the course was either tied or leaning American. Then, Ludwig Åberg beat Patrick Cantlay 2-1, Europe's first full point of the day. And on the 18th green, Shane Lowry holed a 6-foot birdie putt against Russell Henley to retain the cup. Tyrrell Hatton's half point against Colin Morikawa sealed it. Europe 15, USA 13. Close enough to believe, not close enough to finish. And that might be the most brutal kind of loss there is. Up next, the thing about this one is that Dustin Johnson genuinely believed he was about to play in a major championship playoff when somebody walked up and told him otherwise. After birdies on 13, 16, and 17, Johnson had surged to the top of the leaderboard and led by 1 stroke heading to the 18th. All he needed was a par on the final hole. His drive sailed right, deep into the gallery, and landed in a small patch of sand that was well outside where anyone would expect to find a fairway bunker. Johnson set up over his ball, placed his club behind it, grounded it, and hit his recovery shot. He made bogey, which he thought would be good enough for a playoff with Martin Kamer and Bubba Watson. But then came the tap on the shoulder. See, Whistling Straits has roughly 1,000 bunkers scattered across the property, and a local rule distributed to every player before the tournament stated that all sandy areas were to be played as hazards. Grounding your club in a hazard is a 2-stroke penalty. Johnson's bogey became a triple. He went from 12 under to 9 under and a tie for 5th, 2 shots outside the playoff. And here's one that still hurts to talk about, even decades later. Because nobody in the history of major championship golf has had a Sunday afternoon go this wrong, this fast, with this much on the line. Greg Norman entered the final round of the 1996 Masters at 13 under par, 6 shots clear of Nick Faldo. The world number 1, winner of 2 Open championships, more than 80 victories worldwide, and the one tournament that had tortured him for years was finally within reach. Norman still led by 4 strokes through 7 holes of the final round. Then the wheels came off. His wedge on the 9th came up short and rolled 30 yards back toward him in the fairway. At 10, he flew a chip past the flag and missed the comeback putt. At 11, he lipped out from 10 feet. Then came 12. Norman watched his 7-iron tee shot grip the front of the green for a second before gently sliding back into Rays Creek. Double bogey. In 4 holes, he'd handed Faldo 5 strokes. Another double bogey at the 16th sealed it. Faldo's 67 against Norman's 78 produced an 11-shot swing. A 6-shot lead turned into a 5-shot loss. After the final putt, Faldo embraced Norman on the 18th green. The biggest lead ever blown in Masters history and the most devastating collapse major championship golf has ever seen. Now we move to a moment where the drama wasn't about somebody falling apart. It was about somebody refusing to. Bob May was a journeyman, ranked 48th in the world, showing up at Valhalla in 2000 while Tiger Woods was in the middle of the most dominant stretch in golf history. Tiger had already won the US Open and the Open Championship that summer. He was chasing his 3rd consecutive major, so nobody expected a fight. But we got one of the best duels golf has ever produced. May shot 66 3 straight days, matching Tiger blow for blow down the stretch. On the par 4 15th, May stuck his approach to 4 feet, while Tiger missed the green entirely. But May inexplicably missed the short birdie putt, keeping the margin at 1. Tiger had to birdie each of the final 2 holes just to force a playoff. And on 18, May curled in a double-breaking 15-footer for birdie, forcing Tiger to drain a pressure-packed 5-footer to send it to extra holes. In the 3-hole playoff, Tiger chased in a 25-foot birdie putt on the first hole, the famous one where he ran after the ball and pointed it into the cup. On the final playoff hole, Tiger blasted from a greenside bunker to 18 inches, and May's 25-foot birdie attempt to extend the playoff broke hard at the end and missed by inches. Tiger won by 1, but Bob May, he went toe-to-toe with the most unstoppable player on earth and nearly pulled it off. And rolling right along into this next one, there are moments in golf where everything falls apart and the story ends badly. And then there are moments where everything falls apart and somebody produces the single greatest shot of the entire tournament to save it all. At the 2024 US Open, Bryson DeChambeau had carried a 3-shot lead into Sunday, but Rory McIlroy had been on a rampage. 4 birdies in a 5-hole stretch around the turn pushed Rory 2 shots ahead with the finish line in sight. Then, McIlroy's putter betrayed him. He missed a 30-inch par putt on 16, then lipped out from just inside 4 feet on 18 for another bogey. DeChambeau had the lead back by 1, but he still had to finish the 18th hole, and he was in serious trouble. His tee shot went left into the native area. Trees behind him, a root in front of the ball, there was nowhere to go but sideways. He punched out into a fairway bunker, 55 yards from the hole. Par to win from a spot where par looked almost impossible. DeChambeau grabbed his 55-degree wedge and swung. The ball landed short, rolled across Pinehurst's crispy green, and settled 3 feet, 11 inches from the cup. He buried the putt and won the US Open by 1 shot over a heartbroken McIlroy who was already heading for the parking lot. What comes next might be the single greatest bunker shot in the history of major championship golf. And the man who hit it never once expected it to go in. It's 1986, and Greg Norman had started the final round with a 4-shot lead over Bob Tway. And through the front 9, it looked like another coronation for the great white shark. Norman had led all 4 majors after 3 rounds that year: the Masters, US Open, Open Championship, and now this. He'd only won 1 of them, so the pressure was relentless. Norman's lead was gone with a double bogey at the 11th and a bogey at the 14th. Tway had stripped all 4 shots in the span of 8 holes, dead even. The par 4 18th would decide everything. Tway pulled his drive into the right rough, then flew a 9-iron into the greenside bunker. Norman was just off the green on the fringe, 25 feet from the pin. Tway was staring at sand, a downhill green, and the biggest moment of his life. He opened the face of his sand wedge, swung through the ball, and watched it float out, land about a foot onto the putting surface, and roll straight into the cup for birdie. Norman's response to the hole-out was, in his own words, unprintable. He chipped past the hole, missed his par putt, and Tway won by 2. He was 27 years old in his 2nd full year on tour, and he just won his first and only major with the most ridiculous shot imaginable. That leads us to a moment where a single 3-putt changed everything, proving that what happens after the final hole can matter just as much as the game itself. We're at Harding Park, where the atmosphere felt like a rock concert as Tiger Woods and John Daly traded 350-yard bombs. Tiger clawed back from 2 down to force a playoff, and on the 2nd extra hole, Daly had a 15-footer to win it all. He missed, then shockingly lipped out the 2-foot comeback. Just like that, it was over. Tiger actually bowed his head in disbelief. Even he knew a showdown like that shouldn't end on a missed tap-in. While that runner-up finish was heartbreaking, it was the aftermath that truly shifted the scales. Instead of heading home, Daly drove straight to Las Vegas and sat down at a high-stakes slot machine. In just 5 hours, he lost $1.65 million, more than double the prize money he had just earned for 2nd place. Daly later admitted in his autobiography that if he didn't get his gambling under control, it would ruin him. That missed putt on the green stung, but the night in Vegas became the real turning point. He was never quite the same competitive force again. Just one choice and one night can permanently shift a career trajectory. Sticking with moments that absolutely defied explanation, there's what Hale Irwin pulled off at Medina. Irwin was 45 years old. He hadn't won on the PGA Tour in 5 years. He needed a special exemption from the USGA just to get into the field. He started the final round tied for 20th, 4 strokes off the lead. Then the back nine happened. Irwin went on an incredible tear, 4 straight birdies starting at the 11th, and suddenly he was in the conversation. But he still needed something special on the 72nd hole to have any chance at all. From 45 feet, across the entire green with 7 seconds of agonizing roll time, the ball dropped into the cup for birdie. Irwin took off on a full sprint around the perimeter of the 18th green, completely losing every ounce of the composure he'd carried for 2 decades on tour. The thing is, he hadn't actually won yet. There were still golfers on the course who could catch him. Mike Donald eventually tied him, forcing the first sudden death playoff in U.S. Open history. On the 91st hole, Irwin rolled in a birdie from 8 feet and became the oldest U.S. Open champion ever. He dreamed about winning it 2 weeks before it happened. Then, he actually went and did it. This brings us to a shot so absurd that even the pros thought it was impossible. We're at the 2012 Masters, which started with a literal bang when Louis Oosthuizen holed a 235-yard albatross on the very second hole. It felt like his green jacket to lose, but Bubba Watson had other ideas. Bubba tore through the back nine with 4 straight birdies to force a playoff, and that's where things got weird. On the second playoff hole, Bubba hooked his drive deep into the woods. He was standing on dead pine straw buried behind a wall of trees, with absolutely no view of the green. The announcers basically wrote him off right there, doubting he could even find the fairway. But Bubba doesn't play conventional golf. He pulled a wedge and lashed at the ball, keeping it low under the branches before it did something gravity-defying. The ball screamed out of the trees and hooked nearly 90 degrees to the right, landing softly on the green just 15 feet from the hole. It was a physics-bending miracle. Oosthuizen couldn't recover from the shock, and after Bubba tapped in for the win, he broke down in tears. It was the ultimate Bubba golf moment, proving that if he has a swing, he has a shot, even when nobody else on earth would have dared to try it. That leads us to a moment that felt like a decade in the making. And somehow, when the moment finally arrived, it nearly slipped away 3 separate times before he could grab it. Rory McIlroy took a 2-shot lead into Sunday's final round, chasing the career Grand Slam, something only 5 men in history had ever achieved. Then the first hole happened. Fairway bunker, forced pitch out, 3-putt from 20 feet, double bogey. Flashbacks to 2011 were immediate. But Rory being Rory, he managed to claw his way back to a 4-shot lead by the turn, but Augusta is never that kind. Holes 11 through 14 went bogey, par, double bogey, bogey, 4 over in 4 holes. His lead was gone. Then came the shot. On 15, facing tree trouble after pulling his tee shot, McIlroy played a massive hook from 208 yards that found the green, setting up a birdie that brought him back to life. A stunning approach to 3 feet on 17 gave him another birdie and the solo lead with 1 hole to play. All he needed was par on 18, but he missed a 5-foot putt. Meanwhile, Justin Rose drained a 20-foot birdie on 18 to force a playoff. Now back on that same green for sudden death. The tension was unbearable. After Rose narrowly missed his birdie, Rory stood over a 4-footer to end the wait. This time he did not blink. He buried the putt. The 6th man in history to complete the career Grand Slam. The first since Tiger Woods. And from there we head to what might be the most chaotic final 2 holes in U.S. Open history. At Chambers Bay, nobody was safe, and the lead changed hands 3 times in just 20 minutes. It started as a 4-way tie for the lead, but by the back 9 it was pure mayhem. Jordan Spieth looked like he'd slammed the door when he drained a birdie on 16 to go 3 shots clear. But then the wheels fell off. Spieth carded a messy double bogey on 17, watching his entire cushion evaporate in seconds. He managed to regroup with a clutch birdie on the par 5 18th to finish at 5 under. But the drama was far from over. Dustin Johnson was right on his heels. He stuck a gorgeous approach on the last hole, leaving himself a 12-foot eagle putt to win the whole thing outright. If he 2-putts, we go to a playoff. But Chambers Bay's greens were notoriously bumpy. Players joked they were like putting on broccoli, and they were about to claim a victim. DJ's eagle putt rolled 3 feet, passed, then, in a moment that stunned the crowd, he lipped out the birdie putt coming back. 3 putts from 12 feet, and just like that, it was over. Spieth became the youngest champ in 92 years, though he looked just as shocked as the rest of us that he actually won. Up next, when everyone has already written you off as yesterday's news, proving them wrong becomes sweeter than any victory you've ever tasted. Back in 1986, a newspaper article called Jack Nicklaus washed up and gave him no chance whatsoever. He was 46 years old and hadn't won a major in 6 years. Sitting 4 shots back on Sunday morning, Jack told his son that shooting a 65 would win the whole thing, even though most of the world had already stopped paying attention. For the first 8 holes, he just treaded water at even par. But then the Golden Bear woke up. He birdied 9, 10, and 11, and suddenly the grounds at Augusta started to shake. The real magic happened at the par 5 15th, where he stuck a 3-iron to 12 feet and buried the eagle putt. On the next hole, his tee shot nearly went in for an ace, and by the 17th, he drained another birdie to take the solo lead for the first time all week. He finished with a back 930, posting exactly that 65 he'd predicted. All he could do was watch from the clubhouse as legends like Greg Norman and Tom Kite crumbled under the pressure of his charge. When the dust settled, Jack became the oldest Masters champion in history. The guy they said was done had just authored the greatest Sunday the game has ever seen. And if that proved that the greatest moments arrive when nobody expects them, then what happened 9 years later at Pinehurst proved that some moments are so perfectly timed they become permanent, frozen into bronze and standing on the very green where they happened. In 1999, Payne Stewart was 42 years old, a man who ranked 153rd in driving distance in an era when golf was already chasing power over precision. He'd lost the US Open the year before at Olympic Club after holding a 4-shot lead on Sunday. He came into Pinehurst hungry, motivated, and completely locked in. His final round opponent was 29-year-old Phil Mickelson. The two were tied through 15 holes. Stewart rammed home a 25-foot double-breaking downhiller on 16 for par. Mickelson missed from 8 feet. On the par 3 17th, Stewart stuck his tee shot to 4 feet. Mickelson fired to 6. Mickelson missed. Stewart buried his, a 1-shot lead heading to 18. Stewart's drive on the final hole drifted right. He had to punch out of thick rough, then wedge his third from 78 yards to 15 feet short of the hole. A 15-foot par putt to win the US Open. It climbed the slope, caught the break, and disappeared. Stewart threw his right arm into the air. 4 months later, Stewart was killed when his chartered plane lost cabin pressure. That fist pump is now immortalized in a bronze statue sitting just off the back of the 18th green at Pinehurst. Which brings us to this one. Sometimes the golf gods dangle perfection right in front of you, then snatch it away on the cruelest bounce imaginable. Tom Watson was 59 years old when he showed up at Turnberry for the 2009 Open Championship. He hadn't won a major in 26 years, so when he opened with a 65, everyone figured it was just a fluke. But Watson kept grinding, holding the lead all the way to the 72nd hole. He stood in the 18th fairway, needing only a par to become the oldest major champion in history by over a decade. He pulled an 8-iron and hit what looked like the perfect shot. It landed exactly where he wanted, but instead of settling, it just kept rolling. Whether it was a gust of wind or a bad kick, the ball trickled over the back of the green. Suddenly, he was faced with a nightmare of a par save. He lagged his first putt 8 feet past the cup and watched in disbelief as his par attempt missed by inches. Just like that, he was headed for a playoff with Stewart Cink. By then, the magic had completely evaporated. Cink ran away with it, leaving Watson totally deflated. He later admitted the loss tore his guts out, not because he made a bad swing, but simply because of where the ball decided to bounce. Up next, a moment where 6 feet of grass carried the weight of an entire continent. The 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island was so intense they called it the War on the Shore. Between the rowdy crowds and the heated gamesmanship, the tension was through the roof before the first ball was even struck. By Sunday afternoon, everything boiled down to the final match. Bernhard Langer against Hale Irwin on the 18th green. The Americans held a slim lead, but if Langer could drain a 6-foot par putt, the Europeans would secure a tie and retain the cup. Langer knew the stakes from the 15th hole on, and he had battled back from 2 down just to give his team this chance. As he stood over the ball, he noticed spike marks on his line. He decided his best bet was to hit it firm and straight to power right over them. He struck it well, but the ball agonizingly grazed the edge and refused to drop. The U.S. erupted as they secured their first victory in nearly a decade, while Langer was left devastated for his teammates. Langer actually went out and won the German Masters the very next week, a true champion's response. But in the history of the Ryder Cup, that one missed six-footer is the moment everyone remembers. Which brings us to the gold standard of final hole meltdowns, and honestly, no amount of context can prepare you for how absurd this actually was. Carnoustie, 1999. Jan van de Velde stood on the 18th tee leading the Open Championship by 3 strokes. He needed a double bogey to win the Claret Jug and become the first Frenchman to claim the title since 1907. But what happened was the most chaotic single hole in the history of professional golf. Van de Velde pulled out his driver and pushed it far right onto the adjacent 17th fairway. Then, instead of laying up safely into the fairway, he inexplicably went for the green with a 2-iron. The ball flew right, struck a grandstand railing, ricocheted into deep fescue, and now he's hacking out of knee-deep rough with water still between him and the green. His third shot found the berry burn. Then he took off his shoes and socks, rolled up his pants, and waded into the water, seriously considering playing the shot. The rising tide eventually made the decision for him, and he took a penalty drop, chunked his 5th shot into a greenside bunker, then somehow got up and down for a triple bogey 7 to force a playoff. Paul Rory, who'd started the day 10 shots behind, won the playoff by 3. 3 shots ahead, needing a 6, and he made a 7. That's a fever dream.